Hello, welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. Today's date is 28th of September 2014. Welcome to any new listeners, and thanks for your support for people who've been listening for a while. Currently in Odessa, Ukraine, where the atmosphere is pretty good considering there's a war going on in the east still, although there is a ceasefire at the moment. Basically, it's a fairly good holiday kind of atmosphere at the moment, very different to how it was when I was here some months ago and there was people being shot in the centre and people burning to death in one of the government buildings. Everything's fine where I am at the moment anyway. Today's news. So I just wanted to say about the Scottish referendum where they voted no. I mean, there are some allegations of vote rigging with some video evidence. But really, I think it's more of a question of successful media manipulation and mind control, again, with people being scared to take a risk on the unknown. And it's a bit of a shame, but there you go. I would have been surprised if they'd been allowed to get away with it, to be honest. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's not over. If people, people think we have to vote and go along with it. Actually, if the majority of people in Scotland want to be independent, it's not too late. This isn't that wasn't a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. People can just take to the streets. I'm not advocating violence. I'm talking about peaceful protest. You know, if millions and millions of people take to the street, there will be a visual display of support for independence. And at the end of the day, when the people rise up, there's not much they can do. So I think it's still not the end of it anyway. If you want to be independent, Scotland, go for it. Now, talking of rising up, we have the leader of Hong Kong's Occupy Central pro-democracy movement announcing the launch of a mass disobedience campaign, and thousands have gathered outside government headquarters in central Hong Kong. There was arrest of 60 protesters who'd entered a restricted area previously, and students and activists opposing Beijing's decision to rule out democratic elections in Hong Kong in 2017 are unhappy. And there's lots and lots of young people supporting that and blockading the heart of Hong Kong's financial centre. ISIS news. US-led coalition airstrikes have hit Islamic State targets. Allegedly, the Pentagon says. An IS building and 2 armoured vehicles were destroyed at the Kobane border crossing. This was announced by the US Central Command. And there's been talk of other targets being hit elsewhere in Syria and northern Iraq. Seems to me like basically they wanted a war, and they have plans for certain wars in Syria, Iraq and other countries. And when they try to get public support, which they prefer to do to avoid unrest, they tried to do it with the chemical weapons allegations in Syria. That failed, and so this was just, it doesn't bother them too much. They've always got a plan B, and this was their plan B. They've actually created a lot of support for attacking ISIS now. And there's already been reports of children being killed in these airstrikes. Whether you agree or disagree with the airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq, it's been proven that it doesn't work. I mean, what's the difference between what happened before in Iraq? They've just created a massive mess, yeah? And instead of looking at these options as solutions, they need to find out the root cause of not just problems in the Middle East, but problems in the entire world. And really, that means we need them to all step down, because they're not capable of solving these problems because they don't have the correct mindset. They come from an elite background with business agendas and really no understanding of what it's like to suffer or to worry about where your money's going to come from for your next meal or for travel. People normal people have experienced that. not everyone. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong to have lived a life where, you know, your family had supplied for you. That's fine. But these people have had an overprivileged life. They've gone to private schools. They've never had to worry about money, and their futures are almost guaranteed. We need to get those people out. They're not the kind of people that make the best decisions for society and for the world. Let's talk a bit about Ukraine since I'm here. The EU's Energy Commissioner is hopeful of a deal between Ukraine and Russia to end their dispute over gas deliveries. There's talks going on in Berlin. And I'm going to try and do a bit more research into the Ukraine situation and maybe link up with Pete Wicker again soon and talk about Ukraine as well, what's going on here and where it's going to end. I mean, there were fears at one point this was going to lead to World War III. Who knows? There's a relatively quiet period, at least there seems to be. Whether there actually is in East Ukraine, I'm sure there's still people being killed and places still being blown up, as we saw with an explosion that was reported last week, which some said were tactical nuclear weapons being used. I don't know about that personally, but it didn't really look as big enough to be a tactical nuclear weapon to me. More videos of cops shooting people from the US. Seem to be very trigger happy, the cops over there. There was I don't know if you've seen the video of a guy at a petrol station, completely innocent, pulls up at the petrol station, and a policeman asked to see his license. Well, number one, why is he actually asking to see someone's license anyway when the guy's done nothing wrong? I mean, he's just gone to get some fuel, so there's the first mistake. Second mistake, he asks him to get his license when the guy eagerly goes to get it, too fast for the police, because they're like, no, you've got to move slowly around them. But he eagerly goes to get his license, which is on the seat in his vehicle, and so the officer just shoots him repeatedly. The guy is lucky to be alive. Fortunately for him, the cop wasn't that good a shot and only hit him once. But you know, it's just crazy. This mentality that the police have in the US needs to stop, where they think they can just shoot you if they think there's any kind of threat, when most of the time there isn't. I saw another video of a guy told to get out of his vehicle and put his hands up, which is exactly what he did, and he gets shot anyway. And I think the excuse was given, well, he might have had a knife. Well, the police were at least 10-20 meters away, so there's not a threat there, not unless the guy's like one of those expert ninja knife throwers, you know. Okay, I also wanted to talk about our voicemail service. I want to try to encourage people to use that. It's like basically like a phone-in feature, so because I want to have more interaction with the audience here that's listening. So I'm going to put a little video up on this this video showing how to use the voicemail service. So you can just leave a 1.5 minute message to show your views on something that's happening around the world or something we talk about on the show. And you leave your 1.5 minute comment, and it gets put on the show, and then I will respond to all your comments. I believe we've had one in today, so let's go and listen to that now.
Hi Scott, it's Ron here, just trying out your new voicemail system, and wanted to drop you a message about Ebola and the conspiracy theory that's the Bilderberg group actually behind it, and they're certainly involved with the vaccines that are being created. And there was, in the meeting this year in 2014, the Bilderberg group, there was a number of people from the pharmaceutical industry. Wondered if you knew about this and what your take on it was. Cheers, bye.
So thanks Ron for doing that. The voicemail service is for listeners and guests, previous guests that have been on our show, that want to just keep in contact. And that sounds like it was Ron, our researcher from Celebrity Deaths episode. He brought up an important topic, the Ebola virus and what it means for everyone, and its links to Bilderberg and others who want to reduce population levels. And there are direct links. I'm not just scaremongering here. I've been looking into this. So at the 2014 Copenhagen Bilderberg group meeting, there was lots of biochemists, doctors and pharmaceutical heads attending this secret meeting. Also there was Kasim Reed, the mayor of Atlanta, who oversaw 2 American missionaries being brought back from Africa and cured with a miracle vaccine. There's a lot of links to various groups and things, and I just think something is going on. Now, quite what it is, we can just only speculate and investigate at the moment how bad it could be, but something's going on, and I don't think it's good. I mean, is this the killer virus that the elite have planned for us all? I don't know, but let's look at what. Let's just do a little bit of investigation together. So I'm just going to go through some information, and maybe we'll come across some things. I know we will actually, because I've already come across some things. So Ebola is a human disease, and other primates are also affected by the Ebola virus. The symptoms start 2 days to 3 weeks after contracting the virus. You get like a fever, sore throat, muscle pain, headaches, also vomiting, diarrhea and a rash, decreased function of the liver and kidneys. And people can begin to bleed within the body and externally. And if you look at some of the pictures of Ebola victims, it's not a pretty sight. It does look like something out of a zombie apocalyptic movie or series. Have a look on the internet, have a look at pictures of Ebola victims. It doesn't look like the kind of disease you want to contract. I mean, of course we don't want to contract diseases, but it looks pretty nasty, put it that way. I mean, human to human transmission can occur with direct contact with blood or bodily fluids, so it sounds a bit like AIDS in that way. From an infected person. There's been a lot of cases of people contracting it during the funerals of other people who've been killed by the virus. So there's obviously hygiene is essential, particularly looking after the care of needles and syringes, as within AIDS. Okay, let's look about the origins of the Ebola virus. I think it has connections to the Marburg virus, which occurred, I believe, in the 70s. And the first case of the actual Ebola strain of this virus was in 1976. And I found some connections with the World Wildlife Fund, World Health Organizations. I don't mean necessarily direct connections, I'm just talking connections with people. Basically, the group's mission of the World Wildlife Fund was set up to stop the degradation of the planet's natural environment and to build a future in which humans live in harmony with nature. Prince Philip being one of the proponents of this, and actually directly connected with the World Wildlife Fund up until the late 90s, I believe. But he still does a lot of work for the World Wildlife Fund. He's a big conservationist now. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, but there's a dark side to conservation. And it all stems from, for me, it sort of stems from the estate management, which Prince Philip will be very familiar with. You know, managing a large estate, managing the animals on that estate, animals such as deer and badgers, and culling them if necessary when they feel that it's not benefiting them or other animals or species or plants in that environment. And Copenhagen seems to crop up a lot, I think, because it was this year or last year when there was a headline of a giraffe, a young giraffe being killed, actually killed in front of children as well, as a kind of study, because they felt it was in the benefit of the giraffe gene pool to kill this giraffe, a completely healthy giraffe. And Copenhagen Zoo came under a lot of attacks verbal attacks from people for doing this, and rightly so, I believe. There was nothing wrong with this giraffe. It's perfectly healthy. They believed, oh no, it's in the best interest of all future giraffes to just brutally kill this giraffe. And then to do it in front of animals, to do it in front of children, as a form of education for the future as well. And it's just to let people know this is perfectly normal. So culling is a big thing amongst the elite, you know, and fox hunting, things like that. It's always been something that the elite have been interested in. And one thing I wanted to say about Prince Philip is, you may be familiar with, if you type in Prince Philip and population control, you'll come up with a video of Prince Philip openly saying that population control is necessary. And in fact, in one case in 1983, Prince Philip chastised aid workers and charities for helping to treat victims in Sri Lanka. He was basically saying that the best intentioned aid programs are actually helping increase the population by stopping natural diseases like malaria, and I guess he'd probably say the same about the Ebola virus. This is just nature trying to cull the population. If you actually start protecting humans, or giving them any kind of protection, then, or helping them, then you're actually doing a bad thing there, because it's much better for humanity to die out. I mean, he actually did say he'd like to come back as a virus and exterminate humanity, and I think this is the problem. Now, some of you may think that there is a population problem. I don't actually think there is. There really isn't. There's plenty of. There's definitely not a land mass problem. There's vast areas of the world that are unpopulated. Some of them maybe because it's desert or it's too cold. But even if you discount that, there's still vast areas of land still unpopulated. And I think with the deserts and the cold areas as well, we have technology these days. We could live anywhere, because we can control the temperature in buildings. So it's not really a problem. I think it's a problem of distribution of wealth, distribution of resources, and that's due to the mismanagement of our world leaders. So they're the problem, and the solution they're trying to propose is a solution to a problem they perceive as too many people, but it's not. That's not the problem. Let me know what you think about that anyway. That's just my opinion. Okay, so let's just move on. So basically, Prince Philip is connected to the World Wildlife Fund, who have lots of offshoot organisations as well, and they have have tropical rainforest campaigns, and they have another organisation called the Traffic Conservation Programme, which basically helps ensure the trade in wild plants and animals is not a threat to the conservation of nature. And I think we're going to be talking about this later, about the love of nature. And I, of course, love nature, especially in our technological age. When I spend way too much time with technology on the internet, I just love walking amongst nature. But I think there's also another agenda of making people love the planet and love nature more than actually loving each other. And I think that's the priority. First, we should actually start loving each other and not think of each other as a disease or a virus. We're not. It's only the worst people that maybe you could say were a disease and a virus. And the worst people are sort of psychopaths and people who are bringing war and destruction upon the earth. Those people could be seen as a virus. Now, you probably have many friends and people around you, and I don't think you'd think of them as part of the problem. It seems to me the people who are the problem are the ones who are actually trying to control it and acting like gods, and advocating the culling of populations, basically, as well. And they don't just do it with humans, they do it with animals, so we can see the evidence there. Okay, so let's move on to talk about I just also wanted to mention that Prince Bernard, the Bilderberg founder, is also connected to the World Wildlife Fund. Founded the 1001 Club in 1970 with the aim of raising funds for the World Wildlife Fund, and he was the first chairman, and along with Julian Huxley, eugenicist, was also a founding father. So back to Ebola. In 40 to 50% of cases, bleeding from puncture sites and mucous membranes, that's sort of around the nose and gums and areas like that, has been reported. The bleeding typically begins 5 to 7 days after the first symptoms, and sufferers can cough up blood, vomit, or obviously diarrhea as well. The disease has a high risk of death, killing between 50 and 90% of those infected with the virus. As I mentioned before, Prince Philip has talked of coming back as a virus and sort of helping depopulate the earth, culling, and maybe they've decided to do it before he dies as some kind of sort of present. I mean, the Georgia Guidestones, which you may or may not be familiar with, if you're not, just look it up on the internet. It has a new 2014 block added, so have a look at that. So there's a small block that's been added to these strange guidestones which talk of cutting the Earth's population down by over 90%. And there's a new block added that says 20 on one side of the block and 14. Is it some kind of symbolic gesture to say that this is the year where it's all going to start? Type in Georgia Guidestones basically and check that out yourself. A lot of the stuff that I talk about, you need to do your own research because it would just take up too much time to talk about it. I mean, there's definitely something going on with those Georgia Guidestones. They must have cost a fair amount to make, and they're being updated and monitored. So it seems to me like what they're designed for is for groups such as the World Wildlife Fund and the people connected to it, and Bilderberg. Sorry, I'm not saying the World Wildlife Fund is all bad, by the way. Just to make that clear, I'm talking about some of the people who are involved with the World Wildlife Fund and the World Health Organization. Some people I'm sure who work for them are fine, and you know, people may have donated to them, fine. But there's people at the top that have different agendas. It's the same with the UN. There's a lot of people working for the UN who are fine, but there's a lot of people who aren't, and it's usually the people at the top. It's the same with society, basically. There's a lot of good people in society, but the people at the top aren't necessarily as good. Okay, so moving on. I've mentioned I don't believe there is a population problem. I believe there's a distribution problem, distribution of wealth being one of the main problems. I mean, if you look at Prince Philip and the royal family, they get a crazy amount of money from the actual population of the UK. Mostly complicit, and there's another example of mind control, media manipulation. I mean, Clarence House is the royal family's PR agency that control all the information that gets released to the press, and they have people working amongst the press, so it's no wonder a lot of the population of the UK think giving part of their salary to make the royal family rich beyond anyone else's wildest imagination, so they can wear different clothes every time they're seen in public. They have all the finest foods they're ever going to need. Of course, if there is an Ebola virus, which does kill large sections of society, it's not going to affect them. They'll be given protection, they'll be given vaccines, they'll be given antidotes if they did unfortunately catch it. But, I mean, whether this virus is the virus that's been designed to wipe out humanity, or whether it's just a virus that's been introduced to make money from vaccines, from antidotes, or whether it's in a trial run of or an experiment for a larger one that's coming later, I don't know. But I do know that if you look into the past of Ebola, which was named after a river in in Africa, basically in the Congo, I believe, in 1976. Basically, you can see that there was a lot of organizations around then that started up. I believe that that society that I mentioned, the traffic conservation program, looking after the trafficking of plants and wild plants and animals, was set up in 1976, where the first case of Ebola was discovered. There was other outbreaks in 1995 when 250 people died. But as I mentioned before, it's also strange that the worst case of the Ebola virus happened obviously this year, 2014, the same year that the vaccines and antidotes seem to be made ready by, started by a company whose name I've forgotten at the moment, in 2007, and managed to finish their production of the viruses and antidotes all ready for the worst ever outbreak. And you know, I don't think there even has to be a massive outbreak internationally. There just has to be one or two cases, and then they just roll out all these expensive vaccines and antidotes and charge millions. I believe the company that made one of the companies that made the antidote has already been given millions of pounds of funding. Anyway, that's what I think about the Ebola virus so far. Just a roundup of last episode, we talked to Jasvinder Sanghera about honour killings. Hope you had a chance to catch that episode, as it's a very serious issue. Not just honour killings, but forced marriages as well. I mean, there's a lot of issues, and I just want to tackle them on these programs too. You don't have to agree with everything I say, or or agree with my political stance, but we can still disagree on some topics, but still agree that killing people to protect a family's honour, or forcing someone to marry someone is at least something we can agree is wrong. As I mentioned, I'll be linking up again with Pete Wickert soon. The Truth is Stranger Than Fiction. Catch out his show on YouTube. Just type that in on YouTube. Truth is Stranger Than Fiction with Pete Wickert. We'll be contacting him soon to do another show from Ukraine, talk about Ukraine's situation and other world events. Today we're going to be joined by Sheila Zilinksy. Now, she's the host of Weekend Vigilante. Some of you may have known her from the Hagman and Hagman show. And the Weekend Vigilante and some of the shows she's doing are some of the fastest growing shows in alternative media. And they look at a lot of important topics. And she's sort of been compared to like a female Alex Jones. And she looks at the New World Order, totalitarianism. I'm glad I said that properly. Tyranny, erosion of freedoms, liberties. And she looks at things from a Christian angle as well, with Hagman and Hagman. This is very much a Christian perspective on some of the things that are going on. And we like to look at all perspectives. I like to look at all perspectives on this show. We've talked about atheism, we've talked about Christianity before, we've talked about we cover topics that deal with the Muslim issue, on Islam, and I want to bring as many different people with different viewpoints on, so that even if you disagree with them, we can all at least understand everything and at least try to get along, Anyway, Sheila also wages war against establishment corruption. I think we try and do that on this show as well. Corporate fascism, eugenics, which we've just been talking a little bit about. Martial law, the encroaching draconian police state, which is happening in a different way in the UK, I believe, as well. Like I think I mentioned before about protesters being arrested before the G8 summit had even started. Today we're going to talk about revelations and climate change, amongst other things. So we'll be talking when it comes to revelations. A lot of people think about 666, the Antichrist, Mark of the Beach. Mark of the Beach. You can tell what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about my next holiday. I mean, I'm here in Odessa near the beach as well, so that's probably why I said that. So, sorry, Mark of the Beast, Wormwood. Anyone who hasn't read Revelations, the final book of the Bible, there's a star which is supposed to fall from the heavens. And a lot of people believe that Revelations is a prophetic book which talks about future, what's going to happen in the future and in the end times. And a lot of Christians believe we're in the end times at the moment. And we're going to be talking about that, you know, Armageddon. Geddon, I believe, being a place on the outskirts of Israel where a lot of people believe the final battle of Armageddon is going to take place. As I've mentioned before, whether you believe this is going to happen may not be that important, because whether you believe it or not, some people do believe it, and even some people in power, some of the world leaders believe it, and some people believe they're going to try and orchestrate it anyway. Obviously, if you're a Christian, you may believe this is going to happen due to prophecy in Revelations, but certainly you can at least say that in Revelations it talks of things which do appear to be happening. So if you're not Christian, go and read Revelations and read about the interpretation of it, because there's a lot of symbolism in there. But most people who study the book of Revelations will talk about, some of it's quite clear. They'll talk about peace treaties being signed in the Middle East. You know, and that's been being talked about for many years. Talks about Israel becoming a nation, which happened in 1948. And some people say that basically, as Israel became a nation in 1948, a generation will not pass until these events that are prophesied in Revelations will come to pass. And certainly, you know, some people believe this 666 Antichrist will ask people to take a sign or a symbol on their forehead or hand. I believe it's the right hand, which they won't be able to buy or sell without. Now, that's not so far away, I think. You know, I mean, people talk about the RFID chip or a barcode on your forehead or hand. Certainly, when I arrived in the airport in London last time I came back from Ukraine, my face was scanned. I think it was a facial recognition system, but it certainly made me go through the queue quicker. And I think a lot of these things, you know, if you weren't able to buy any food or sell or travel, unless you had this chip implanted on the skin, and it might just be a quick injection, completely painless, would you stand up to that, or would you take this mark? I think you'll find most Christians won't take the mark, or at least people will have to choose whether they're going to take this mark. What about you? Let me know via the voicemail system that I told you about earlier. What's your opinion of first of all Revelations, and things like the mark of the beast? But we're going to talk about that with Sheila Zilinksy. We're also going to talk a little bit about climate change, which will be quite a controversial issue with some people, as you know, a lot of people believe that the climate is changing and that humans are responsible for this change in the environment. I'm not sure I do, to be honest. I don't know either way at the moment. I try to keep an open mind. I mean, I'm not for pollution, so I certainly think we're polluting the environment, you know, and we're doing that through nuclear testing, for example, which is not only polluting the environment, but actually causing higher levels of cancer, I believe. I mean, it's proven, scientific fact, that nuclear detonations create cancer-producing clouds of mushroom clouds. So the fact that there's been over 1,000 nuclear tests over the last 50 to 65 years, surely that can't be right. And if you look at the video on YouTube, type in all the nuclear detonations since 1945. There's a Japanese guy who's made a video of that, I believe. You'll see it spread out across the entire planet, where we've got puffs of smoke going up with cancer producing mushroom clouds at regular intervals, and over 1,000 of them. So have a look at that video anyway. So anyway, I don't think we should be harming our environment, but I am slightly suspicious about some of the agenda, because I believe especially when it's connected to the government, because I believe what they do is latch on to some problems that they see the population has taken under their wing, and then try to exploit it. And I was never impressed with Al Gore, to be honest. Again, it comes back to the blind trust in authority example, which is on the back of Truth Sentinel t-shirts, now available. Sorry, quick plug there. Basically, what I'm saying is questioning climate change does not mean that you have to be someone who goes around throwing litter, spraying pollutants into the air, etc. You can still, switch off light switches, conserve water. By the way, conserving water. Water may be one of the biggest issues coming up worldwide. People are predicting there may be wars fought over water at some point. And so the bucket challenge wasn't perhaps a good idea, chucking water over yourself. No offense to anyone who did that. I'm just saying, that was an extreme waste of water there. And the people who, the charity that benefited, a lot of people donated money to, more than £1 million of that money goes to, in the UK, goes to the salaries of not a large number of people. That £1 million, they're all on sort of £250,000 to £350,000 each. I wonder if they got any bonuses. I think, again, it's the distribution of wealth. Is it a fair distribution of wealth? I don't know. Anyway, so again, what I'm saying about climate change is, fine, look after the planet, but don't put it at the top of your list, because there's a lot of other big problems. How about taking care of each other first, then take care of the planet? I think the planet's pretty resilient, actually. I think it's maybe a little bit arrogant of us to assume that we're, basically this particular generation is going to wipe out this planet. Not sure, personally. Just saying, I'm not sure. I'm not someone who denies climate change. I don't know, to be honest. I haven't seen enough evidence that proves it's definitely happening. I won't blindly accept that it is happening. I'm not just going to blindly accept it. The problem with charts and pie charts and things that Al Gore relied on is you can just make those up about anything, to be honest. So just to be clear again, I'm not denying climate change. I'm just saying haven't seen enough evidence, and I think what I don't like is people being ostracized, scientists being ostracized who talk out against it. And there are scientists who say, no, this isn't happening. The ozone layer has always had holes in it, and temperature changes and weather changes, even extreme weather changes that we see, have always been there. So anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit. And the other thing I don't like about the climate change agenda is making, again, people feel like they are the virus upon the planet. I think it buys into that a little bit. It does tie in a little bit with population control. I've even heard one campaigner saying he would be willing to die himself if millions of other humans died with him in order to preserve the Earth. Sorry, that's just nonsense. That's crazy talk, in my opinion. What do you think, anyway? So you can sort of see when you hear about people like him saying that, you can sort of see what people are saying when people say the green agenda does have a little bit of earth worship as part of its philosophy. And I think Sheila will be talking about that later. That's just her view, and I think it's important to listen to everybody's points of view on this climate issue, and not to get angry if someone, and sort of accuse someone of wanting to destroy the planet if they have these views, because that's where the danger in it is, just blindly believing stuff without checking out the facts and without talking about it. And this is the main problem with today's society, not being able to question facts or question topics, being herd mentality, trying to control people, accusing people of being things they're not if they're just questioning. Don't question 9/11, otherwise you're unpatriotic. don't question war, otherwise you're not supporting the troops. It's all part of manipulation and control. Anyway, so I'm just saying, take care of each other first. That's the priority. I think we're more likely to destroy each other and all life with nuclear weapons before we destroy our own planet, which is pretty resilient anyway. So some of you may know Sheila from the Hagman and Hagman show. Let's just go to the interview and talk with Sheila now. Hello, Sheila.
Hello, Scott.
Hi, welcome to Truth Sentinel.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on your program.
It's very nice to have you. How's things in Canada at the moment?
Well, probably not unlike the UK. There's definitely some interesting things happening in Western Canada and also, of course, across the North American continent. A lot of interesting things indeed.
Indeed, there are. And you'll be doing some shows this weekend. I heard you on Hagman and Hagman, first of all. How did you become involved with that show?
Well, I had a show for years. In fact, I had a couple of different shows. I started actually in radio with a Special Forces fellow that was working in PSYOP. And we had done some shows. And then actually one of the guests that I had brought on ended up filling in as a co-host. And the audience liked him so much, the network asked him and I, which is Dr. Tim Ball, he's a renowned climatologist who wrote The Deliberate Corruption of Climate Science. Incredible, brilliant man. He's, taught climatology for over 25 years, just incredible. He was really instrumental in the Climate Gate scandal, etc. Just incredible person. I actually ended up doing a fairly ongoing show with him for several years. We had a kind of an interesting format, but we started really gaining momentum. And then it was interesting because I was a guest on quite a few shows, but in particularly one show, I was asked to come on the Hagman show. And at that time, I had just left a network, and I guess some of the listeners had inundated Doug and Joe and myself actually in terms of joining alliances, forming a fusion. And we, after careful consideration, that's what we ended up doing. So I was invited to do a weekend show with them, and that's what we do now. And it's actually quite a robust audience, and it's really been a wonderful collaboration.
It's a great show, actually. I listen to Hagman and Hagman quite a lot, and listen to yourself on there as well. It's really informative. They get some good guests as well who seem to know a lot about what goes on behind the scenes.
Well, yeah, there's such an acceleration of incredible things unfolding that it's, you can't make these headlines up nowadays. And there's a lot of, we're seeing literally prophecy on fire right now. We're seeing Bible prophecy fulfilled. And that's, we try to always keep it, it is a Christian-based conservative show, but we do try to really have an eclectic mishmash of guests, a real variety. But again, a lot of our guests, I'm going to say, are really bring the biblical perspective, sort of end time news type of venue. It'd be similar to True News, Rick Wiles. It'd be very similar to that kind of a format. It's not as much Alex Jones with all the, I find Alex Jones is a lot of sort of the regurgitation of, the police state and this and that, but we always try to kind of come with a Christian perspective of it.
Yeah, no, and that's good. On my show, we try to look at all the different perspectives, but the Christian perspective as well. Today we were going to have a look at the book of Revelations and prophecy, like you mentioned, and end times kind of chat about end times. Do you feel like a lot of Christians believe we're in end times now? Do you feel we are, and what gives you that feeling?
Well, one of the things that's really interesting is, and I think we're in a really significant time here, shortly before his crucifixion and resurrection, Jesus Christ delivered a major prophecy of end time events, Scott, and it's recorded in Matthew 24. You can find it again in Mark 13 and Luke 21, and he was asked by his disciples, when will all these things be? And one of the things that he was asked, and it was phrased very interesting, they asked him, what will be the sign of your coming? and of the end of the age. So in Matthew 24:3, people can look that up. Jesus responded with a description of conditions and events that would lead up to his actual coming. And that would be obviously his second coming. So, and moreover, what was really interesting, Scott, is he said that these signs became evident his return would occur within one generation. And I really do believe this is that generation. I mean, although it's been nearly 2,000 years since Christ gave that prophecy, we obviously have grandparents or, great-grandparents, and they thought that their generation was the time of his return, and turned out to be wrong, of course. But interestingly, there are a number of prophecies in the Bible that could not be fulfilled until this sort of modern era, more, the post-World War II period. And I really believe that they're describing conditions that are literally unfolding right now. And it's just really fascinating. And, I think even the person with the most virulent normalcy bias, Scott, will look around and go, something's off. People sense in their spirit that something's not good. I mean, we see the lawlessness ramping up. We see, like I said, you can't make these headlines up. I was actually stunned the other day. There was teenagers that were putting out, people can actually do a search on this. It's called the Blaspheme God Challenge. So, there's just ubiquitous lawlessness abounds. There's all this pressure for this politically correct, sort of watered down, lukewarm Christianity, and I really think that America, for the most part, now, why I use America is because America really has always been the sort of, standing bastion of freedom around the world. There's never been people call it a democracy, but it is a constitutional republic, and that's important to know because there's nothing ever been like the United States Constitution, ever. There's never been anything since. There's never been anything before. It is not the last free country in the world. It was the only freestanding country in the world, and it remains to be that. Unfortunately, a soulless group of clandestine technocratic oligarchs have really hijacked and I call it pirate terms here, Scott, pillaged, plundered, pilfered the United States. And I think America's at war, and some people don't even know that. Really, everything from technology to their culture, everything is absolutely being plundered. And this progressive ideology, it's really kind of a Marxist socialism, even neo-fascism that's all interwoven into one. And people have to understand that Obama is not just a legal immigrant. He's not just a Muslim, but he's also one of the globalist puppets that is really doing things that he is told to do. So it's not all on Obama. He's just simply, he's a chess player in the bigger game. And he is a very nefarious fellow. Let me leave it at that.
Well, he does seem to lie a lot. I've noticed that. I mean, looking at some of his promises that he made, I was looking at some of his election promises. I mean, a lot of politicians do that, but he seems to have taken it to another level, with things he's promised and then the actual opposite he's done,
Yeah, he says one thing, and actually there was a YouTube video that really kind of gives credence to this. It was actually saying something that he said and something he said later, and they're absolutely so ridiculously, virulently opposite, and it's stunning. It actually is stunning, the lies that this just is churned out of this person's mouth. Absolutely. I mean, when you look at some of the things that are going on right now, I don't know how familiar your audience is with American politics. I mean, obviously,
I think we do have quite a large number of American listeners, so some people will be familiar, but others won't. There'll be people from the UK and people from other countries too.
Well, absolutely. Well, I'm sure your audience understands the setup of the Constitution. And essentially what's been happening is there's really, Scott, been a steady erosion of the Constitution, really. And it's just absolutely mind-numbing when you look around. And I think one of the biggest things, and I'll tell you where I'm going with this. Years ago, Tim and I, the biggest thing that got me in broadcasting was the fact that I was a high-level executive for environment for years and years, and I really knew there was something very shady about the whole climate debate. I kept hearing this global warming, and I would look at these interesting reports that would be submitted by industry and oil companies, and I was doing a lot of negotiations as an approvals director You know, because when you're dealing with environment, our mandate is land, air, water, and biodiversity. And some of the reports that I was seeing were very, let's just say, nefarious. And I thought, it's very interesting. At that time, that is actually when I got a hold of Dr. Tim Ball, and I said, what is your take on this, you know, this big green agenda? And I think it's just really important for people to understand something here. The green agenda, and I think why this is so important, Scott, is because the green agenda is actually part of this, this overall more, I guess, sinister kind of thing. So I'm going to actually explain what I mean by that. Years ago, I had interviewed an incredible man. He had a PhD in ecosystems analysis, and he led a multi-million-dollar research project in the 90s on global warming. And he is the leading expert on Agenda 21. And in fact, I'm having him on my show again this Saturday. So really respected man. He and his group actually stopped a convention on biological diversity being ratified in the United States Senate. And what's really important about that is that if he had not ratified that, we would be full-scale, full-spectrum dominant. So, you know, and I always say people have to understand that progressive ideology, I mean, it sounds good, right? And all these terms are such, this is the issue, they're very benevolent kinds of sounding things, but it's always very malevolent. Like, for example, sustainability. It sounds good, eco-friendly. It all sounds like really good terms. It sounds like they're really taking the high road, but here's the problem with that. They're not, and they have very, like I said, nefarious roots, and I'll get into a little bit of that. But so the problem is that nowadays, though, our kids are so indoctrinated, you know, they have no connection to the Constitution, liberty, freedom. They never question the mainstream, which is permeated with progressive ideology, so they never really find the truth, but rather they're fed this steady diet of lies. So they don't understand the precepts of liberty and wealth creation. And this is the key to free market system in America. This is capitalism. The key is why our founders set things up the way they did. And over the last few decades, we have seen this systematic attack on our property rights, you know, turning all the property rights over to the UN, which is the most diabolical of all creations. And they're always running around parading as Grand Peace Central, but they're not. It's quite, like I said, it's quite more insidious. And most of us don't understand how critically important property rights are. Our freedoms, our liberties, and wealth creation. You cannot create wealth without private property. And it's basically the socialist, well, this, I guess socialism is a better word, that we see in Europe right now, that was started over 200 years ago by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And that whole model of, it's really a model of complete tyranny. So, I mean, you know that what that sort of socialist system has done to the European nation. And socialism, it really demonizes wealth creation. So when we read statements out of the Agenda 21 protocol, like property ownership can result in social injustice, I mean, that is just absolutely staggering. So to give people an understanding is Eugenics huckster Zbigniew Brzezinski, I'm sure your audience is familiar with that term. He openly proposed a 300-page book, and it was called Two Ages. And some of the recommendations in that book led to the formation of the Trilateral Commission, which he then led for many years. And in this article, he laments that a single leap into world government, which of course he preferred, wasn't attainable. So he was urging this end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, and then he was advocating for a piecemeal transfer to the UN's International Money Fund. So it's called the IMF. It's a monetary fund set up by the UN and pretty much the banking cartel, and the UN's World Bank, and there was some other things like their food conference and their population. But here's the problem. When you have all these globalist pals, and you've got, you know, Zbigniew Brzezinski and the who's who of the globalists, kind of these heavyweight hucksters with these, you know, the redistribution of wealth plans, really, they're, you know, it's a complete termination of your basic freedom. So your religion, your speech, your property rights, it's a complete regimentation of all human activity. And that is very nefarious, Scott. So anyway, what does this have to do with sort of what's happening now is there's been a very, again, it's very insidious, it's very longly planned out. I mean, you have the the Federal Reserve that's been in place since 1913. There is this cabal of collectivists that have really orchestrated many world events leading up to now. And really the green agenda has a very sinister component to it. And, you know, because like I said, sustainable development, it sounds good. But if you attend a Christian church now, you're being taught to follow Gaia. You're being taught about sustainability from your preachers, and they've mixed in the Bible and the goals of the UN. And Gaians teach that the divine earth must be protected at no matter what cost. So essentially, you have Scott, you basically have less rights than a rock. And Al Gore in his book, Earth in the Balance, echoed this view that prehistoric Europe and so much of the world, he said, was based on the worship of a single earth goddess who was assumed to be, you know, the fount of all life and radiated harmony and blah, blah, blah. And then he goes on to say, you know, the last vestige of organized goddess worship was eliminated by Christianity. And he was throwing out words like 15th century in Lithuania. He was quoting de Chardin, you know, the fate of mankind depends on an emergence of a new faith in the future. Well, what faith was that? The earth is our mother. So this Gaia worship, Scott, is at the very heart of the global green agenda. And, you know, this sustainable development, eco-friendly agenda 21, the Earth Charter, and the global warming hype, you know, it was global warming. Now they flipped it to climate change, and now Al Gore calls it climate crises. But it's all part of the Gaians' mission to save Mother Earth from human infestation. And don't forget, it's not Sheila Zilinksy saying this. Look at some of the statements out of these globalists' mouth. Prince Philip said that if he could ever be reincarnated and come back, he'd come back to Earth as a deadly virus to wipe out the scourge that is humans. I mean, why don't we start with you there, Prince Philip?
Oh, believe me, I'm not a big fan of his. Yeah, I mean, you can tell that he would actually like to come back as a virus and get rid of everyone, but not maybe basically not the elite. Yeah, leave them behind.
Yeah, well, the elite sort of believe in their brains that, you know, they have, I mean, it's kind of a real interesting sociopathy with these people because, you know, when you have a megalomaniac, absolute sociopath, and I really believe these British inbred bloodlines, the Rothschilds trace their roots back to antiquity, and they believe actually that, you know, they're going back to the Nimrodian era. So, I mean, you know, that's going pretty far back. So you have essentially these royal bloodlines, these Illuminati kingpin families. And in his book, The 13 Bloodlines of the Illuminati, Fritz Springmeier really lays this out like no one else. And he really connects these families and, you know, things like, okay, what's the difference between Illuminati and the Freemasons and these other secret society like Skull and Bones? He really lays out very deep, really in-depth information in his books. And so you've got these, again, inbred families, these royal bloodlines, and they are hell-bent on complete totalitarian, aka bringing in their new world order, and they will not stop until they achieve that.
And they even managed to get the support of the population, because here in the UK it's only a minority that actually talk against the royal family, but it's a ridiculous idea. The idea that you give a family just based on their bloodline everything they're ever going to need, you know, and more 10 times, a million times more than they're ever going to need in respect of wealth, clothes, food, travel. We pay for everything, and people seem to accept it here. And the more I've thought about it, the more ridiculous it seems.
Well, ridiculous, yeah, very much so. And I think what's very disturbing to me, and I see this, you touched on it, is this absolute loyalty to the monarch. And what's really disgusting to me, and people, my gosh, you know, people lose their minds when I say things like this. I have people, you know, all over the world that listen to our show, and I get just absolutely relegated to the depths of the dam for coming out with this stuff. But here's the thing, do some research. You know, people just kind of, you know, they're walking around in this dystopic trance, singing Kumbaya while Rome burns around us here, but they are not informed, Scott. And that is the biggest disturbing thing to me, is people don't bow, oh, it's the Queen, well, let's bow down to the Queen. But it's interesting because Canada actually is still really under a constitutional monarchy. as well, which is, we still do pay homage to the good old Queen. Really, I mean, she's more of a symbolic figurehead, but, it is absolutely unbelievable. And people, again, can actually, I will see if I can provide a link to this, but if people type in Sheila Zilinksy, Dave Hodges, if you do a quick Google search, and you type in the CPS ring, or just the word CPS, which is Child Protective Services, Dave Hodges and I really get into the bowels of how insidious, nefarious, and ominous this Queen really is, and some of her connections to child sex rings, child sex, really deep kind of sacrificial, satanic, children sacrificial, also just really nefarious stuff. And
absolutely, and that's a massive topic in the UK at the moment, because we've got a Westminster child abuse scandal going on at the moment, and people behind the scenes in the alternative media know about the connection to the royal family, but nobody in the mainstream is prepared to talk about that. In fact, the police, I know, have said they don't want any mention, they don't want the royal family brought into this, when there's some clear links there.
Well, what's very interesting is these people seem like they're really the untouchables, don't they?
They do, yeah, and it's not just the royalty. I mean, I noticed Obama flew in the other day and stopped in the UK, and he stopped at Stonehenge. I don't know if you heard about that at all.
I did hear about that. Isn't that interesting?
Well, what it showed me as well, these people they really are considered to be gods almost, because if I go and see Stonehenge, I can only get about, within couple of 100 meters of it, because there's a big cordon around it. Members of the public, the plebs basically, they can't go anywhere near it, but he can come in, just walk straight into it, and there's barbed wire around it, and a family were able to meet him, and he shook hands with them over the barbed wire, and they were saying how nice he was. But to be honest, if he was that nice, he would have invited them in past the barbed wire, wouldn't he? You don't shake hands with someone over barbed wire.
Wow, isn't that just, you see, that kind of information is just mind-numbing and staggering to me. And, we've got so many issues going on that he really should be dealing with, and yet he's not. Don't you find that really fascinating, that Obama is, quite frankly, he's not doing anything that he's supposed to be doing as a commander-in-chief.
Well, how about nuclear weapons? I mean, he made some pledge in his election campaign that he was going to do something about getting rid of them, and they make it sound so complicated that you couldn't just get rid of them. But actually, you know what? If someone really made the effort, and someone like Obama would have the influence to bring all the world leaders together and just get rid of them, because they say they'll get, that they don't like chemical weapons, and that's such a terrible thing. But nuclear weapons, you can't get much worse than that, really. They should just get rid of them.
Well, the thing is that, he says one thing and he does the exact opposite. And we had a nuclear weapon debacle in South Carolina last fall, where there was actually nuclear weapons that went missing, and there was CIA, top-level CIA people and military officers. I've had, CIA operatives, former CIA military, even three-star generals I've had connections with that have really very much solidified some of the practices Obama has, carried out, including he did a complete house cleaning of the military when he did his little litmus test to see if soldiers would fire on American people. I mean, you got to think about all the things happening right now. There's just no end to everything going on concurrently. You mentioned nuclear weapons. We've got ISIS, ramping things up. This, I'm sure if you've been under a rock is the only way you haven't heard about this Islamic militant group ISIS, formerly known as Al-Qaeda in Iraq and recently branded as the so-called Islamic State of, really, this is the stuff of nightmare, folks. These are ruthless, fanatical killers on a mission, and their mission really is to wipe out anyone and everything from any other religion and impose Sharia law. And these mass executions and beheadings and even crucifixions are committing are like badges of pride. They're videotaped and uploaded for the world to see. This is really the new face of evil, Scott. But here's the thing. I wonder if people in the UK, or for that matter worldwide, would be interested to know who helped fund and arm these psychopaths. And so the American government has been really deeply involved. And yesterday was actually September 11th, which is interesting, 13 years after the terrorist attacks. And that has never been resolved with the American people. You had a poll out just last week saying people actually are really starting to believe that 9/11 was an inside job. And yet, why has it always been crickets chirping when it comes to a real, actual investigation? So, you've got all these sort of false flags brewing. You've got the Ukraine situation heating up, and back home here in the States, it's Caligula level crazy town. Terrorists have more control, more territory, more weapons and money than they've ever had, and there's still, again, what's disturbing is this, and again, why I brought originally how familiar your audience is with U.S. politics, is the people are unilaterally disarming against this enemy. So we're becoming really isolated, we're abandoning our allies, we're leaving big chunks of the world open for these subhuman barbarians to get stronger. And there's been lately a lot of talk that, ISIS is now in the U.S. and, there's going to be some false flags. But, the staggering thing is, Scott, that we have fewer combat-ready soldiers since before World War I. Our military is so badly degraded, and we used to be the big military juggernaut of the world. So, and we won't build a secure system for our border. You see, I don't know if your people see, because, of course, the mainstream media just churns out what they want you to know, but there's just absolutely insanity going on at our borders in lockstep with all these other things. So, like, if you step back and take a macro view, no one in government supports securing the United States borders. The politicians won't build a secure system for the border. If you now support a secure border and the deportation of people flooding in, well, you're a racist. Obama won't act, Congress won't act, nobody's acting. And you've got guys like Chuck Hagel referring to ISIS as some of the most brutal barbaric forces ever, but a force in a dimension that the world has never seen. So my question is, what are we doing about it? I think, honestly, Obama said, let me find the most stupidest guy on earth and let me make him Secretary of Defense. Let me find the second stupidest guy ever and I'll appoint him Secretary of State. And the third stupidest, I'll make him...
Is that John Kerry?
Well, also the CIA
I get a real bad vibe from that guy whenever I see him on TV. He just seems... Sometimes he seems to be in a trance and, he just seems to have a complete thirst for war.
Oh, yeah, he's an absolute total piece of work, that guy. He actually should be charged and hung with high treason, actually, really. I'm not even being, usually when I say things like that, I'm being a little bit facetious, but I'm not even saying that as facetious. He actually, a lot of these hedonistic hucksters should be tried for treason. I mean, we're in a post-constitutional crisis. There's more fraudulent shenanigans by this imperial President Obama, or as I call him, Obama. We've got these 375, almost 400,000 pending immigration cases. They keep pushing them through. The courts are in this chaotic backlog. The system is set up to fail. Again, these, like I said, fraudulent shenanigans by this imperial dictator. We're in a post-constitutional crisis, and this is what's very scary. Our appointments clause is under attack. Our commerce clause is under attack. Our First Amendment, 14th, the treaty clause. I mean, incredible. I mean, that is the stuff news is made about. I mean, the amazing thing is you have these so-called civil libertarians out there saying not one word. These phony fraud liberals and journalists out there. I can think of about 30 impeachable offenses by this commander-in-chief, but we're not allowed to talk about that.
Do you think this commander-in-chief that you talk about, do you think, as we were talking about the end times, do you think it's possible that he could be the commander-in-chief that sort of leads the West into the final battle of Armageddon that's mentioned in Revelations?
Well, a lot of people talk about him being the Antichrist, but you've got to, there's kind of 4 prophecies unfolding now, and on this lens, I mean, obviously there's more to come, but you got to think about the 7-year period and begin an occurrence with, I mean, may not be, okay, like it may not be in a perfect sequential order, but you've got, okay, think about this biblically. I mean, every day is kind of like a nature hike through the book of Revelation, but then you've got to put Daniel and some of the other heavy hitters prophetically of the Bible, Isaiah, Daniel, you got to sort of sequentially put this into a context. You've got a Middle East treaty to be signed, so that's confirmation of the covenant. You've got, the mark of the beast. You've got prophetic destiny of Europe, a third temple to be built. That's pre-abomination. You've got the Antichrist revealed. So does the Great Tribulation begin in the middle of a 7-year period known as the Tribulation? Some think so, some do not. They're actually working on a peace treaty right now. So you've got this acceleration of things unfolding. Like I said, we talked about that earlier in the show. There is a lot of Bible prophecy unfolding right now.
Well, I know it says in, I'm not sure which book, whether it's Ezekiel, Daniel, Revelations, about Israel becoming a nation, and a generation won't pass until these things come to pass, which I think was 1948, wasn't it? So,
well, yeah, actually, it's really interesting because if you go to I believe, think about that. I think it's 2 Thessalonians 2:7, and we've got Michael the Archangel. Michael is the one restraining the Antichrist. It's Michael the restrainer, which will be taken out of the way so that the revelation of the Antichrist might be manifest. So once Michael's taken out of the way, he will ascend into the heavens and begin war with Satan to cast him down to earth. So there's several events that will simultaneously take place here. The first event will be the stopping of the daily sacrifice. The second will be the revelation of the Antichrist. And the third sequence of events will be removal of Michael the Archangel. So when all these events suddenly, those simultaneously take place, this will begin the Great Tribulation period. And Paul said nothing about anything being taken out of the world. He said plainly that someone was going to be taken out of the way. So yeah, it's absolutely men that have corrupted the word of God to declare that something's taken out of the world. It's Paul that says very distinctly, I mean, he didn't say any such thing, and a lot of people, if you go read Daniel 12:1, it says, and at that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of the people, and there will be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And if you go to the Strong's Concordance and you look up that word standeth, it's amad. In Hebrew, that means rise up, mount up. So, the doctrine of the Bible has absolutely really been twisted. And so that's the problem, is a lot of people don't really have a good comprehension of biblical, what it really means behind the Bible scripture. And if you really intensively study it out, there's absolutely no question in my mind that we're living in the very last days.
I suppose for some people they're not sure what's symbolic and what's literal. I mean, because if you look at Revelations, you've got a lot of interesting characters. You've got people sitting on thrones, 24 crowned elders. I think there might be about 20 in the UN at the moment. You've got 4 living creatures, lions, horsemen, angels, trumpeters. You've got the wormwood star, scorpion-tailed locusts. You've got Abaddon, 2 witnesses, a woman and a child. There's a lot of people mentioned, and images of beasts from the sea. People aren't always sure what's symbolic and what's going to be a literal beast from the sea.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, you have to have, from a biblical perspective, you have to understand the Father evenly divided a lot of things up between the prophets. So, I mean, Revelation for some people is just right over their head. But if you get into a really intensive study on it, and you study it out and you study those words in the Greek and Hebrew, you'll see very quickly that there's a picture that starts to emerge. And you have to put it in context with everything else. Again, Daniel is very significant. And the Antichrist, the false prophet, these are things that are highlighted not just in the book of Revelation. So, one of the really good books I recommend people get to really understand Revelation, and as a matter of fact, if you go to weekendvigilante.com, my website, and you click on the show from September 6th, click on that, and there's actually a link to Pastor David Langford's book, Revelation 13 Revealed, but it also talks about a lot of other script. It's not just Revelation 13, but Revelation 13 is the one that is kind of the big kahuna. the really big kahuna that gets into the, the nitty gritty about what's going to happen. The man of sin, the son of perdition, the second beast, the false prophet. It really walks you through a gambit. So I really highly recommend that people order that book. And it's a very inexpensive book that is an incredible compilation. He's got another book called The Book of Jude that is very good. I'm sure your listeners would love that too.
And I mean, one thing that people are interested in is obviously the number 666. Although I've heard some people say it's actually 616. And a lot of people have said that could be the microchip under the skin on your hand or your forehead. Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. There's a lot of talk about the chip, of course. The mark of the beast. When you read, no man can buy or trade, no man can buy or sell. I think that's how it's worded.
That's right,
without the mark. I mean, we don't really know for sure what this mark is, but it's definitely, if you study that out, it's definitely something that is a predominant mark. It's not just, a lot of people say things like, oh, well, it's just a symbolic thing. No, I really do think that without this particular mark, whether that's some kind of, I think about the Nuremberg case where you have a lot of people tattooed. It would make sense that it could be an RFID chip. It could be something. Well, think about this though. Every single thing in your wallet, these IDs are just biometric tracking devices anyway. They're all linked together. Your medical records are all linked to your driver's license, to your passport, to your banking information, to your medical records. Everything in this system. They're hacking, tracking, attacking us. We've got SoundCat and citizen spies. We've got, Big Brother cameras on every corner. Everything in our daily lives are being under the watchful eye of Big Brother. So why wouldn't it stand to reason that, especially in this cashless society that we are, breakneck speed railing into, why wouldn't it make sense that it could be something as easy as an RFID chip? I don't know for certain what it is. That could be even a precursor to it. But, there's definitely something. And it won't be something like, oh, I was vaccinated and they inserted a chip. It will be something that you will choose to get, I believe. I really believe from studying the scripture, it's not something that the government can just come and, give you a shot of something and there's nothing you can do. I think it'll come down to refusing it or not.
Yeah, and it does sort of make sense that because everything is heading that way. By the way, I said 24 crowned elders could refer to the European Union. I said there was 20 now. It's actually 28 now, so 4 would have to drop out. What about talking about the mark of the beast and everything? What about the opposite? I mean, it does mention that Jesus is going to come back again. Do you think there's a possibility that the Messiah that the Jews talked about in the Old Testament, do you think it's possible that Jesus could already be down on earth?
No, I don't think that's possible based on what I read. Here's the thing, there's a lot of pre-tribulation rapture schools of thought, and I absolutely vehemently disagree with the pre-trib rapture. I do not believe that Christ is just going to come back, in the next week or whatever. I believe the Bible is correct, and if you study it out, it really talks about a great tribulation. And so, things are bad, but we haven't seen nothing yet. Do I believe that Christ will come back in our time? I have reason to believe that, just based on everything I'm seeing in Jesus talks about things unfolding like labor pains. Now, what that means is things are getting stronger, faster at the end. And my goodness, we see such an acceleration even in the last few years, Scott, that it would really make sense that it's very possible that our generation will see the return of Christ. But in the meantime, I think things are going to get absolutely unbelievably bad.
How do you think people would recognize him? Because there are people that have already come forward and said that they're Christ. In fact, I even interviewed one on this on my show who says he's the Messiah. And there's a guy in Australia who says he's Jesus' return. He actually seemed like quite a nice guy. I don't think he is Jesus, but he says he is. And how are people going to know who this person is when he comes back?
Well, there used to be an expression when you were younger, well, how will I know when I'm in love? And they used to say, you'll just know. Although it may not be a good example, I don't think there is going to ever be a replication of what is going to happen. This is not something you're just going to wonder about. I really believe that true believers are going to absolutely know that they know. And I don't believe this is something you can stage. There's a lot of people, and the Bible talks about in the end times there'll be many false prophets. Look at the false prophets, this ubiquitous plethora of pulpiteers now that are churning out false doctrine. I mean, you've got Joel Osteen and the people like Rick Warren that are pumping out the Chrislam, these big mega preachers, I call them telepickpocketists. They are absolutely just churning out false doctrine. And, the Bible is very clear on what happens to people like that. Very political correct, lukewarm, watered down phrases of, don't want to offend anybody. And it is just absolutely unbelievable. There's not a lot of men today that are preaching the true gospel. Pastor David Langford from The Voice of Evangelism is one of the few men I know that is really a prolific scriptorian and old-fashioned powerhouse preacher. And that's, other than him, there's just a handful of men that I know. There was some men that are now passed away. Leonard Ravenhill was one of my favorites. Derek Prince, incredible. I think Derek Prince has a lot of still good information on it's Derek, like Derek Prince. You might want to Google him. He's got excellent material.
I've heard of him, actually. I remember when I was growing up hearing about him. He used to cast out demons and things like that.
Very, very incredible, powerful deliverance minister. And, I mean, healing and deliverance was just, absolutely incredible man. And, he is such a soft-spoken and astute and brilliant man, and yet he is just so gifted in the gospel.
We're going to have to go shortly, but I wanted to ask you a quick fire questions. Wormwood, the star that's mentioned in Revelation, do you have any theory on that? I mean, some people talk about asteroids. Some people say that the actual Chernobyl translated means wormwood in Ukrainian and Russian, which I know it does. But any theories on what that could be about the star named Wormwood that that's mentioned in Revelations?
Yeah, to be honest, there's so many different ways that's spun. You're right. I mean, could be an asteroid. I don't have a really strong opinion on that. There's a few things that I used to think, and now I'm not too sure on that theory. No real big, light bulb moments about wormwood.
Okay. Another question, a final question, really. You do shows such as the Weekend Vigilante. What's on your radar at the moment? What are you going to be talking about?
It's really interesting because, again, I have Dr. Michael Kaufman on. We broadcast from 8 Pacific right till 10 o'clock. So we have Fritz Springmeier, the author of The Bloodlines of the Illuminati. So, again, I have a eclectic mishmash of guests, and you can find all the information about our times on the website weekendvigilante.com. And there's a lot of great information on there. There's Endtime news headlines. There's a weekly prayer group that I've set up. It's a call-in prayer line. I think never in the history of mankind do we need prayer more than we do right now. So there's a lot of good information. Again, our Saturday night shows is called The Weekend Edition. The instigator and the investigator of the airwaves kind of teaming up for, a very interesting show. So Doug Hagman from Hagman and Hagman and I do a Saturday night weekend show, and it's really been it's been fun. It's been really great to sort of collectively pool our audiences and bring people only the top-notch, cutting-edge guests. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I've enjoyed listening to that as well, and enjoyed talking to you today. And we've only just started skirting over the topic, really, but I'd love it if you could come back at some point in the future and we could really analyse it even more, if that's possible.
Absolutely love to. Yes, would absolutely be just honoured to do that again, Scott.
Thanks for coming then, and please pass on my regards to Hagman and Hagman as well, the father and son. Never met or spoken to them, but I do like what they're doing as well. And good luck with your show. Hope it goes well. And thanks very much for coming on today.
My pleasure, Scott. And thank you very much for your listeners for catching this broadcast today.
Thanks, Sheila. So thanks to Sheila for that. Nice talking to her. Let me know what you think about some of the topics we covered. Leave a voicemail and we can comment it. I'll directly respond to any of your comments you make on voicemail in the next episode. and I'll put your voicemails in the episode, just to be clear. If you don't want your voicemail in the episode, don't leave one, just use the chat room instead. Today we have part 2 of a debate about positive thinking that we talked about in the previous episode of Honour Killings. I also talked with Anthony, our academic researcher, formerly from the University of Bilkent, now conducting further research from the AGU State University in Kayseri, east of Cappadocia, in the shadow of the Erciyes volcano. Yes, it's a bit of a mouthful. I am getting better at saying it now, though. And volcanoes are also topical at the moment, as there was an eruption in Japan, I believe, where some hikers are believed killed at the moment due to the immense power of the volcanic eruption there. So anyway, let's go to the part 2 of our chat. We were talking about positive thinking. Anthony's arguing in favour of basically that positive thinking movement is not a good thing, and I'm sort of saying positive thinking is a good thing. But I mean, I think we do reach some sort of agreement that I'm not really defending positive thinking movement that takes money from people and maybe gives some false hope. So I hope it's sort of clear in what we're talking about, that actually we're probably closer to agreeing with each other than we think. We left it as we were talking about manifestation, believing in the manifestation of your goal.
You spend too much time, for example, dreaming about getting the perfect job after university. It's almost happened in your mind. So you're perhaps a little less motivated to get down to the boring task of writing job applications.
Yeah, that's just called laziness. That's nothing to do with positive thinking, because I think positive thinking combined with positive action, and that's a vital component. If you take out the positive action, then you're kind of just being lazy. That's all it is.
So who won the research fight?
I think the research doesn't count for an awful lot, to be honest. That's what I was basically saying. I was just basically saying research doesn't count for an awful lot at the end of the day. Research is what fills scientific papers and gets funding and that kind of stuff, you know. But, you know, I suppose it has some use, but it doesn't tell us an awful lot, because people can just create their own. I guess if you wanted to prove something, you could set up a research group in a certain way and you would achieve your outcome.
Yeah. I think it's true. It's very much dependent on the terms of the experiment. Yeah, we see that even in science as well. You can prove different scientific things are true, though they may be contradictory, using different experiments.
Well, for example, you can use statistics, and statistics are always used to prove an argument. But I could go out in the street now and say, positive thinking doesn't work, does it? In a very negative way, and I'll get more people to say, no, you're right, it doesn't, because I've said it in a negative way. Or I could go out and say, positive thinking's great, isn't it? What do you think about positive thinking? Do you think it works? Just a tone of voice could change the whole result. So it's all nonsense, really.
Yeah. Okay. There's 2 or 3 more things I want to mention if we have time.
Yeah, we have time. Yeah.
I think so this positive thinking movement has been especially prevalent in American culture. Yeah. And it has a history there. I mean, you know, aside from the fact that Americans just have this reputation for being fairly chipper and optimistic people, which I think is probably true to an extent. But it has a cultural history. So if you go back some time, you find a movement of what were called positivity preachers in, I think, the 1930s. And they really kind of tapped into the natural optimism of Americans to keep them enthralled to the church. Yeah, there was one guy, for example, called Joel Osteen, who was sort of a celebrity of his day. He preached in Houston. And these guys used to tell their congregations, you know, rejoice, don't worry about material things, because God wanted them to have a big house and a nice car. You know, God was hoping for them to get these things. And so if God wanted it, it would happen. So forget about, you know, being careful with money, because this was preordained. This is what God wants for his people. And that's kind of dangerous, because, you know, if people take that literally, then then I mean, they can become stuck in a cycle of debt, and most of the faithful at these church congregations are not multimillionaires. To preach a message of don't worry about finance, God's going to sort it all out is not the most responsible thing, and I think it takes advantage of a character trait that's to be admired, which is optimism.
Well, there's scam artists around. There's people who'll charge, $1,000 to listen to them for 1 hour talking about how they don't need to worry about money. It'll come to them if they just visualize it. Now, that's obviously nonsense, and they're just trying to make money themselves. Yeah. But I think one thing that you did say there about don't worry about money, I have to agree with that, because worry achieves nothing. Mm-hmm. Action, positive thinking and positive action, I would say, is the key. Worrying achieves nothing. So I agree with whoever said that about worrying. Don't worry about money. Don't worry about money, but if you want it, do something where you can get it.
Okay. All right. So the last thing I wanted to say about this is psychologically, I think, again, we're talking about a spectrum here. So, as I've said and you said, being optimistic, not a problem. Trying to see the best in a situation, not a problem. Probably a very sensible strategy. But again, if you take it too far, I think there are dangers to it. And the thing which makes me feel perhaps most disturbed about the positive thinking movement is if you relate it to psychology. I mean proper psychology, not pop psychology like positive thinking. And in particular, I've been really disturbed by some of the things that I've heard positive thinking adherents say. If you listen to these people, they often say, if you keep your thoughts positive, then negatives won't come to you, and if you allow yourself to be negative, that's when problems occur in your life. Now, because I'm a contrary bastard, I sometimes challenge these people and say things like, tell me about the case of the African child who has gone blind and is suffering from dysentery because he has a parasite in his eye that is crawling up into his brain, which it will eventually eat, causing him to go mad before he dies. Tell me about that kid. And I stole this example from Sir David Attenborough. Sir David Attenborough talked about this, one of the rare times when he actually gave his opinion about wider issues. Normally he's just there talking about the biological creatures that he's seeing around him and keeps his opinion masked, let's say, or keeps it away from the screen because it's not the time or place. But on occasion, if asked, he will say this: I've seen some terrible things. For example, the African child with the eye parasite case that I just mentioned, and he said, they make me really wonder if there's a God, what kind of God could this being be to let this happen, right? Mm-hmm. That's his take on it. If you put it to a positive thinking person, you get some really disturbing responses. So you go down these paths where people are saying, well, perhaps this is meant to teach this child some kind of lesson, or perhaps it's about their parents, and you just start to think, wow, a minute ago I was talking to somebody who was like a normal person whose opinions I could respect. Now I'm talking to a psychopath, because nobody could say, oh, well, the kid with the parasite in his eye who's blind and shitting himself constantly and is going to go mad soon and then die before he reaches adulthood. Nobody could say, well, yeah, there's probably a reason for that, and in the big scheme of things, it's all karma. Like, it's just. But
I think that's a very extreme. It's not. I would say that's not generally what positive thinking people would say. I would say that's a very extreme minority group you're talking about who thinks people who've got a disability, it's a result of something they did. I think that's very rare cases. It's I would say about. I just wanted to address some of the things you said there. first of all, I don't think that's necessarily God that's done that. I think it's mankind. I mean, the way we've set up society is this is the result, basically, isn't it? Number two, I would say it's not the job of that boy to change his way of thinking and be positive, because he's clearly in a bad situation. It's where positive thinking will work with that boy is for people outside to look in and say, what can we do for this boy? We can do this, we can do that. Let's overcome these obstacles. Let's help him. So positive thinking can affect that boy from the outside in, rather than giving him the burden of having to do it himself, because he's already got enough problems as it is.
I think that's a really valid point, and the next time I have that conversation, I'm going to say exactly what you said. But I've just been disturbed by how easy it is to get these people on the back foot and get them saying crazy stuff, you know. And I don't think that that they necessarily mean that. I think a lot of the people I've had this conversation with maybe half a dozen people. Where it's ended up in that very disturbing territory.
I have heard of this before, and you know, people who think that people have got some, you know, who've got a disability, they've created themselves. I think that's a really dodgy area to go into.
It is dodgy, and I suspect that some of these people don't sincerely mean it. They're just on the back foot, and they're trying not to lose the argument. But
I guess though, you could say people who believe in some forms of reincarnation, where if you do something bad, you're going to come back in a worse form. So, you know, there are some people who believe that, aren't there?
Yeah, and I have to tell you my Hare Krishna story one time. Maybe not on the program, but about the Hare Krishna version of how you ascend from the point of being a caterpillar up the evolutionary chain. You know, what a caterpillar can do to better his next life. I had a conversation about that with the Hare Krishna one time. It was really interesting. Okay. But anyway, so yeah, but I think it still worries me that these people can even say this stuff, even if they don't really mean it, because I think if you look at the work of many of the great psychologists of the 20th century, they talk about stages that we all go through on our way to maturity. And I am going to have to look up a term here. The 6 stages of moral development is one term that's often used. So when you're a child, you are completely self-centered, and that I don't say that in a bad way. You know, I have a 2.5-year-old son. He's completely self-centered, and he should be, because he's 2.5. But
it's if you're 22.5 that you have to worry.
Exactly. There's stages in which we develop morally from a completely self-centered point of view to I suppose you could say a community point of view. Yeah. But you can track the stages by the way people react to the world, and especially in terms of their empathy with others. And if people don't, if people should pass through these stages and reach they've identified 6 stages in the world of psychology. Perhaps there are really 8, perhaps there are really 4. It doesn't matter. But you should progress through these stages, and when you've done that, you've achieved one important aspect of being a mature adult. But not everybody gets there, because not everybody develops the degree of empathy to another person which tells them that everybody else is as real as they are. So everybody has an inner life that's as real as your inner life. When a bad thing happens to another person, it's as terrible for that person as it would be if it happened to you, that kind of stuff. Some people just never get to that point. Yeah? And in extreme circumstances, we call these people psychopaths. This is a central aspect of psychopathy. Now, I think that any ideology which encourages you to see the world in terms of, okay, I can change the world if I just think positively. The external world will bend to my will. It will bring good things to me if I approach it the right way. Is a little bit psychopathic, because that doesn't treat the external world as being as real as it is, and that's a problem that psychopaths have. They don't see the world outside themselves as being as real as the world inside themselves.
I think it depends how you interpret it. I mean, if you think back to sci-fi movies 100 years ago, or say 60 years ago, a lot of the things that were people thought about the future, they've become, they've actually happened. They've manifested them. It basically, to use a term that's often used in the positive thinking movement about manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
You could say that if you thought about it in that way, that what people imagine eventually does happen. You could see that there's something in it if you think about it in that way.
I think that's a slightly different process, though. That's a process of prediction, of looking at the direction things are going in, factoring in different things that might cause it to go in a different direction, and trying to guess where we'll be.
I don't look at it. I don't look at it like that. I look at it as, and I think that's one way of looking at it, and that does happen too. But I'm not talking about prediction. I'm talking about how people often see what people have imagined and then try to make it. So I'm saying basically when people had views about the future, when they weren't predicting, they were saying, oh, we could have these phones. They weren't looking at technology that existed because there was nothing like it. They were basically sort of saying, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had these? And then the people who progressed in technology over the years thought, wouldn't it be great if we made a little thing like a flip phone that you can ask it any question and it will give us the answer. And Google and some other companies are developing instruments now where you can just talk to them and they'll ask it a question and it will tap into Google and it will come out with the answer. And it's all sometimes things are created out of what people imagined in the past. So it's not prediction, it's creating things from people's previous imaginations.
Yeah, I agree with that. Though anybody who grew up with the sci-fi TV series and cartoons of the 70s and 80s, I think, is still got to be asking themselves, where are the flying cars?
I can show you I can show you a photo of the first production line flying car that's coming out.
Really?
Yeah.
Jeez.
I actually tweeted it. I'm embarrassed to say I'm actually a tweeter now, because when you run a channel like this, it is very useful to set up a Twitter channel. But I tweeted a picture of the world's first production line flying car that's coming out next year. So I can maybe I'll put a photo of it in this episode so people can look at it.
All right, so yeah, about positive thinking. I just want to sum up and say I'm not saying that we shouldn't think positively, that we shouldn't think optimistically, and dream of how things could turn out well, and aim for that. And in fact, I think people who lack any concept of where they might like to be, like next week, next year, 5 years time, whatever, perhaps have a more difficult time in directing themselves and making decisions and so on. But I think when it develops into an ideology, and when this ideology tells you that thinking positively is going to cause the external world to melt and become part of you, and pliant to your will, or B, that anyone who's not thinking positively is doing themselves a disservice and kind of deserves the misfortune that results, then it becomes a dogma, and then I really don't like it. So people who have a positive outlook on life, fine. People involved in this positive thinking movement, I'm worried for those people.
Yeah, see, I think you're talking about such a small part of that positive thinking group that I would disagree to a certain extent. But let me say a few things about positive thinking and tell me if you disagree or agree, so we're
Sure.
sort of more clear. So here's a few statements for you. Positive thinking, people who think positively are often the kind of people that other people want to be around. It gives them more friends, more opportunities, and a wider range of possibilities to explore. What would you say about that?
I can see it. I think I can't help but think. So I just started working at a new university, and I got a colleague here, and a fellow Australian called Mary Louise, who has a very cynical, dark sense of humour, and that at first her cynical, sort of dark take on things made everybody a little bit suspicious of her, and I think that she perhaps struggled a little bit in the first week, was perhaps a bit misunderstood, but as time has gone on and people have gotten to know her a little bit more, that kind of dark humor, the twist that she manages to put on things, has made her a very attractive person for the group of us who've all started this job at the same time. So I think it can go either way. It depends on circumstances and the situation.
Don't you think that's because of the positive thinking people around her who've taken the time to get to know her and thought, no, she's okay, let's spend more time with her? If they'd been negative thinking people around, they'd be like, what a miserable woman, I won't hang out with her anymore. So the positive thinking has actually created a positive situation there.
Maybe, and to be fair, she's not miserable. She's just, like she employs cynical humor. That's quite a different thing to being miserable.
Okay, let's continue anyway. Positive thinking people, it's not necessarily that their lives are better, although they do sometimes seem to attract positive events and people, because if something negative happens, they don't dwell on it. They get up, deal with it, move on. A negative thinking person could make more of a deal about a negative situation, whereas a positive thinking person would. There's an old famous phrase: when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. Surely that's such a it's a nice way of thinking. When life hands you lemons, make lemonade.
It has its limits. I heard an Israeli person say last week, when life hands you Gaza, make limonaza.
What's that supposed to mean?
I think it's about the spectrum. It's true up to a point, I would say.
Okay. Here's some more things about negative thinking people. Negative thinking people can suck the positive energy out of the people around them. I mean, I've experienced that myself. There are some very negative thinking people who need people around them to keep firing positives at them because they think negatively, but they actually do eventually achieve a positive result. I have met people like that. They've come to me and said certain things, and I've tried to be positive with them. They've said something negative back, and eventually they've achieved the goal that they were trying to achieve, and they've almost used me as a stepping ladder to get there, and then they've just walked away like, great, look what I've done, when it's actually the people around them that have helped them get there. So that actually can be quite draining. So that's a negative about negative thinking. So surely positive thinking people actually are less selfish and more considerate to those people around them. Positive thinking and negative thinking are both contagious. So if they are contagious, surely you want positive thinking to be the contagion,
Again, I agree to an extent, but I mean, you've just said yourself that you've been around people whose thoughts are quite negative, and you've been motivated to try to turn those around, and that can happen. And sometimes it can leave you feeling used, but sometimes I think it can also leave you feeling like you actually helped somebody, and that's part of empathy, which is...
I'm not really talking about that. I'm not really talking about someone who needed help. I'm talking about someone who do this regularly, who use this as a way of achieving their goals, who are actually quite successful people. So in some ways they're doing what you suggested, which is just to be realistic and think, accept that it's a negative situation. But they're using other people around them to constantly achieve success. I'm not talking about people who are sad, who I'd always like to help, or people who have clinical depression. Not talking about those people. I'm talking about people, negative thinking people, who rely on positive thinking people to make them become successful.
I mean, I think there's also another case that's possible, and I think I perhaps fall into this category myself in some of the things that I do in life, that I undertake, which is that you have an idea of something you want to do. It's a bit of a crazy idea, and you think, well, it'll probably never work, but I really want to try. Chances are I'm going to end up looking like an idiot, But hey, let's see, and let's try it and see what happens. So if you say chances are I'm going to end up looking like an idiot, and there's a positive thinking person around, they're going to slap you. But I don't think that's a necessarily a terrible a way to go about something.
I think
it might fail, but let's try. That's perfectly normal and fine to do.
But in some ways, that's a positive way of thinking. It's not really negative. I mean, I'll give you an example. If a guy's in a bar, he sees an attractive girl. If he visualizes a successful outcome, he's more likely to approach her as a positive thinker than a negative thinker who'd sit there thinking, "There's no point. She's not going to like me," So, positive thinking and visualization can work in that way. But I think you're right that you need to accept that it's not always going to work. She might slap you around the face.
Yeah, and I think you've possibly come up with the ultimate situation there by which to test any philosophy is, okay, girl in a bar, more attractive than you. Tell me, philosophers. What's your take on this situation?
Exactly. I mean, and the idea of visualization is used in sports psychology quite a lot. The idea of visualizing success, visualizing goals. And if it didn't work, there would be quite a lot of sports psychologists out of a job. And I've got a feeling it probably does work to a certain extent. There must be something in it because people are being employed, getting paid lots of money. I know that's not in itself the end of everything, but I think there may be something in the visualization. It's definitely worth exploring. I don't think it's been proven not to work, and it may still be that the jury's out on it. But it wouldn't be such a bad thing to give it a chance.
You know what I think my issue is here with this whole area is that it is that in some of its incarnations it tends towards fundamentalism, and I have a problem with any kind of fundamentalism, be it religious, ideological, even atheist fundamentalism, psychological fundamentalism, political, whatever. I very much doubt that your sports psychologists are not preparing their athletes for failure as well as for success. I very much doubt that. True,
but we're talking, I think the key with positive thinking is you do need to accept failure. It's how you deal with that failure. You get knocked down, you get back up again, but you've got to have your eventual goal, but you need to accept that it's not going to be easy. Most of the things that are good in life, they don't just come easily. You need to accept that you're going to get knocked down and keep fighting, but you do need positive thinking to visualize that end goal.
I would agree, but I think there's a difference, and if you look at athletes in their post-match interviews when they lose, they will admit that their defeat was bitter, and they should be allowed to do that. They shouldn't go back to the dressing room and say no, and be told, no, this defeat is not bitter. This defeat is it's a glorious defeat. It's something that had to happen and happened for a reason. It's part of your ascent to the top.
I'll tell you what, if I was in a losing team and someone walked in who was a member of the team, a respected member of the team, not someone just off the street, I would he'd be quite welcome in the changing room because, we'd all be sitting there, heads in our hands, and this guy walks in and says that, it would actually make me feel a bit better.
Maybe that's down to personality. I could definitely see this. For some people, that's exactly what they need to hear. This is a step along the way. This had to happen to us to teach us a lesson. That's fine. For me personally, I think I'd prefer to hear, wow, that really sucked. Let's start back at the beginning, and next time we'll know what we did wrong.
That's positive thinking, though. What you're saying there is exactly positive thinking.
But it's a mix. It's not so fundamentalist.
Okay, fair enough. Let me just see if we've covered... I wanted to say about sporting events. I mean, you do sometimes see... I know you hate football, Anthony, but I'm going to go there, sorry. You do sometimes see a football team and they're doing quite badly at half-time. It's a football match is 90 minutes long, half-time, they're doing badly. And I've seen some teams, they react very badly to that negative situation and they go on to lose. And I've seen other teams that think, no, we can do this, we can overcome this insurmountable mountain, and they go on to win. Liverpool Champions League, that it happened there. There was a famous case where they were losing 3-0, I think, and they eventually won 4-3. So it does work. If people believe that something could happen, you have to believe. You have to believe. Otherwise, there's no way it's going to happen. If you believe, you're definitely going to lose. How's that going to help you?
But again, I mean, it's a spectrum, and I would point out in terms of football, I think we were both in Kazakhstan when Kazakhstan played Portugal, right? In Almaty, and the Kazakh team lost, and everybody in the crowd knew that the Kazakh team were going to lose. It's obvious they're playing Portugal, right? But nobody in the stadium was thinking, or in the team was thinking, if we just stay positive, we're going to win. Nobody thought that. On the other hand, nobody took the loss.
I bet there was a couple of people in the team who might have entertained the idea that they could win. And I bet you, I think the key with positive thinking is that it can almost create a miracle, because I bet you if all 11 players had the crazy idea that they could win, I'm not saying that they would win, but I'm saying there would be more of a chance that they could win than if they didn't think that. So I think what you do with positive thinking is you increase your odds.
See, I really liked the attitude that seemed to be prevalent, although I'm not a football fan. I liked the attitude that seemed to be prevalent in that match, which was, okay, first of all, we were beaten by Portugal, but we were beaten 2-1. That's amazing.
Sorry,
That's
you cut out
thinking.
again there, the last four words.
Okay. So the attitude was, all right, Portugal beat us, but they beat us 2-1. We all expected 6-1, which is not positive thinking at all.
Well, in some ways it is. In some ways it is. It's like, wow, look at what we've done here. Yeah. So in some ways it is positive thinking.
In some ways, yeah. But the attitude was, doesn't matter. We love our guys, though they lost. We knew they were going to lose. And it was a wonderful experience to see them playing Portugal, and that's it. No, like, you can do it. No, sorry, you can't do it. You're up against the Portugal team. It's not going to happen. Of course, play hard, do your best, be there, present in the moment, in every moment, and just do whatever you can, and be proud of what you've done, even though the result is a loss.
I think that situation you've described there is the goal is not to win, though, is it? If you have that attitude, it's like nobody there cares enough to win. So it's good. It's good in a way. Yeah, it's great. It's a great way of dealing with a situation. But it's obviously a situation. It's not that an important situation, is it?
No, and it's thinking realistically. I mean, fortunes change, and in the world of football. Well, I don't know much about the world of football, so let's change this to tennis. In the world of tennis, there are plenty of people who, say, like early in their career, went out to face a great player, never had any expectation of winning, but thought, I'm going to give this my best shot, I'm going to play the best match I've ever played, I'm still going to lose, but I'm going to be proud, right?
How do you know they didn't think they could win?
Because they'll tell you that. No 16-year-old who's been given a wild card into a Grand Slam tournament is going to seriously think that they can beat Roger Federer at the height of his career.
I would disagree. I would say I don't know. I mean, we'd have to obviously check this, but someone like Boris Becker, I reckon that everyone around them, I think you'd be right that everyone around them would have given them no hope. But I reckon some of these people who break through actually did believe that they could do it.
You can see, and God, I can't believe we're talking about sport, but you can see these guys sometimes. They're young guys. They go up against a really established player, let's say Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, whatever. They win one set in the match, and they're thrilled. They can't believe it. They're so happy, and for them, that's a victory. That's positive thinking to the right extent. It's like, well, I was never going to beat this guy, but look what I did, And some of those guys go on to then later be in a situation where they do have a realistic chance. But you've got to keep it realistic. You've got to say, all right, I'm not ready now, but I'm going to learn from this, and maybe I'll get a few swings in, and then maybe another time I'll be in a better position.
That's still positive thinking.
Yeah, but it's tempered by realism. That's my problem with the positive thinking movement per se, is that they don't temper it with any realism. So I'm saying be optimistic, but don't allow your thoughts to get carried away, because that's not going to help you at all.
I would still disagree to a certain extent. I would say get carried away to a certain extent, but maybe I mean it in a different way to what you're thinking, because I'm sort of saying dare to dream. Like, it's like, I think I had a picture on the wall when I was younger that said aim for the moon or something. Like we had an astronaut on the moon. It was like, don't aim for something small, aim for something big. It's good to, because and you could, if you really do believe. In a lot of occasions you will get there, but you do have to be, there has to be some realism about it. I mean, I'm not going to be a professional footballer in the Premier League in the UK at the moment, because based on I'm too old. It's not physiologically possible. So you have to be realistic with your goal to a certain extent, but I still think you could dream.
But Scott, you're falling prey to negative thoughts.
No, no, I'm not, because there's impossible, and there's what I do like people to think about is that what other people think is impossible is a lot to do with negative thinking. If it's actually physiologically possible, then there's a possibility it could be done. If it's physiologically impossible, like me playing the Premier League, is I could maybe train every day for the next 5 years. I'm going to be actually, I don't want to give my age away. I'm going to be old. So I would say it's physiologically impossible because of the high standards of the Premier League in the UK.
Scott, I haven't received that invitation to your 21st yet, by the way.
Oh, thanks for that, Anthony. Yeah, I'll send it soon. Anyway, I wanted to say about visualization again. I think the key is to be less specific about what you're visualizing. For example, if you imagine yourself being happy in the future, living in a place by the sea with someone you love and in contentment, that could be possible. But if you imagine that you'll be living in Italy on a specific date, by a specific lake, with a specific person doing a specific job, and working for a specific company, that's where I think positive thinking and visualizations may not be possible. You're being too specific. You've got to let the reality around you have a chance.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and it's taking me off topic again, because I was talking yesterday with a person who is into the Wiccan ideology, and she says, as many of her fellow Wiccans does, that the best intentioned spells go awry because people are not specific enough. That if you imagine wealth and success and so forth, you're never going to get it. You need to be more specific. You need to have something in mind, a place that you want to be, or a thing you want, because if you don't have that, you don't have the focus, and the magic is never going to work. Which is a very interesting question, because I can see both sides of this.
Well, absolutely, I can see that, but I think the key thing is time. Don't be specific about time, because that things might happen. You don't have control over everything around you. I wouldn't go that far, but I think you can influence events around you to a certain extent. How far that goes, I don't know, but I would still keep an open mind that it might be possible. I mean, we live like we started off this conversation. We live in a crazy world. How crazy is it? I mean, I have heard people sort of saying, and this connects to the kind of movement you're talking about. I have heard situations where, say something bad happens, like say you're in a shop and someone walks in and they pull out a gun and shoot someone. I have heard some people say, well, you actually created that situation somehow, some way.
I've heard that too, and that's where I get off the positive thinking roundabout. I cannot accept that. Right.
What I would say about that is, like I just said, we started this conversation. We live in a very crazy world. How crazy is it? I don't know. I don't think it's that crazy, but I keep an open mind because I don't really know for sure, to be honest. I'd like to entertain the idea, because wouldn't it be great if we could create situations around us? I think what I'm saying is it's worth an experiment. If you sat there and you really wanted to have a certain situation in the future, and you sat there and you believed that you could perhaps make it happen using this philosophy, it'd be nice to give it a try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not sure you're convinced. You didn't sound very convincing with your.
No. I was just thinking about what to say next.
You're thinking about what you're going to buy down the shops tomorrow.
Yeah, in this bizarre debate about psychology, sport, and being shot in a public place.
I wanted to leave you with 2 quotes, Anthony, and I mean, you can. I just wanted your comments. I mean, after this quote, the first one is by Stephen King. Mm-hmm. This was on writers, for any would-be writers out there.
Yep.
And, I guess a lot of these successful people are often approached by people, how do I motivate myself to do this? How do I become successful? So a lot of these famous people often give quotes like this. This is from Stephen King for would-be authors out there. Mm-hmm. And his quote was, "You can, you should, and if you're brave enough to start, you will." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And your reaction to that, Anthony?
I'm surprised that he said that, because he should know more than anyone that the publishing industry is brutal, especially now, because the publishing industry is in danger of collapse due to various electronic formats.
Negative thinking, Anthony. Negative thinking.
I know.
Sorry, I'm going to give you another quote now.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Lincoln. "We can complain because rose bushes have thorns, or rejoice because thorn bushes have roses."
Yeah. I mean, it's glass half full thinking, I suppose, which is fine. That's completely fine. I don't know. I think we're actually probably, our opinions on this, I think, are in fact very close. My objection comes from people trying to make money out of exploiting the natural optimism of others. That's my main objection. And the other things that I mentioned early on was people not having the sensitivity to realize the difference, because they're so invested in making money, they don't have the sensitivity to make the distinction between someone who comes to them and says, "I want to be successful," because that's a natural desire of many people to be successful in their life, versus someone who comes to them who has serious psychological problems and they say, "Oh, I can fix those. We just have to think positively." I don't. My objection comes when you solidify something into an ideal, a kind of one-size-fits-all ideology, when it's clearly not going to work for everyone, and it clearly can, in some cases, tend to extremes that are unpleasant.
Okay, well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to agree with you on everything you just said there.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm going to leave you with one final phrase, which is quite famous. And if you could change this phrase to, this is a little bit of a challenge for you, and I'll give you a bit of time. If you could change this phrase to reflect a bit more about the way you think about positive thinking, see if you can change this very famous phrase. And it's Nike, just do it. What would someone from your philosophy about caution, about positive thinking, say about that phrase? What would you add to the end of that? Just do it. Just do it, but...
Just do it, but be prepared for anything.
Okay, that's good. I think that's good, yeah. Yeah, just do it, but be prepared for obstacles maybe as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. I think we've probably covered it there. So anything else you wanted to add?
No.
Okay, well, thanks very much for joining us today, Anthony. It's been nice to hear you again, and I hope you'll come back on again soon. We've got so many topics we'd like to talk about.
Oh, we really, really do. Yeah. There's a huge backlog. Yeah, it was fun. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll be in touch soon, because I think you should come on a bit more often if you can.
Yeah, and I've been enjoying the show, and I love the T-shirt.
Yes, thanks for the plug there. If you do like a T-shirt. Okay, thanks a lot, Anthony. See you later.
All right, see you.
Okay, bye.
So I sort of agree with Anthony on some of his points, and there is a danger that we deny that we're feeling bad and that things need addressing, but, at the end of the day, I still believe there's a lot to be said for positive thinking in general, not the actual positive thinking movement so much, but just thinking positive. We need to have hope for the future, but also positive action at the same time. Remember, blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of truth, Albert Einstein. Please help donate. Please donate £28 to get a t-shirt. We've also teamed up with a t-shirt company. I'll put the adverts up. Remember, the t-shirts that I provide and the t-shirt company, two separate entities. But if you do buy a t-shirt with the company that advertising on this show, which are basically trutht-shirts.com, then they donate £2.50 to the show, and you get 10% discount using the code TRUTH1. Okay, so have a look at the adverts, use the code TRUTH1 to get your 10% discount, and a donation will be sent to Truth Sentinel as well, and that's trutht-shirts.com. Check out their website. So we're basically just winding down the show now. Remember to have a good week. Remember to also contact us on scottsentinel9@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, just typing Truth Sentinel or Scott Sentinel. Contact us at scottsentinel9@gmail.com. You can send us voicemails to be included on the show. You can also contact us on Skype, scottsentinel9. Now, that's also another way you can send a voicemail. So if you leave a voicemail on Skype, I can hear it, but I can't actually put it on the show because I haven't found a way of saving the files actually from Skype. They make it really difficult to do that. So if you want your voicemail actually on the show, then do it via the feature I've added. If you just want to say hello, you can leave a voicemail on Skype. If you actually want to chat to me on Skype, send me a message with a time and a day, and I'll try and be there, and then I can record you, and you can be on the show, and we can have a longer conversation because the voicemail feature is only 1.5 minutes. Also, if you'd like to come on as a guest, please contact me as well. Topics coming up in future episodes could include Fukushima, Chernobyl, missing persons, time travel, Dyatlov Pass incident, religious cults such as Scientology. We'll talk about anarchy, parallel universes, the control of scientific fact, utopia, Noah's Ark and the worldwide flood, revolution. Other shows that we listen to: Hagman and Hagman, Freeman Fly, Mark Cocking, John Gary, David Icke, Pete Wickett, Sheila Zilinksy, of course, Alex Jones. There's lots of shows out there. There's some of the ones that I listen to. There's lots of others as well. Anyone who wishes to advertise or sponsor our channel, please contact us, scottsentinel9@gmail.com. Thanks once again for listening. Hope you have a great week. Catch you later. Goodbye.